I just want everybody to think about, like, what does it mean to be on the left? Right? I mean, what does it mean to be, when someone says someone's more to the left of someone else, what are they talking about? I would submit that what they're talking about is the further left you go, the more communitarian you become, the more you think that there shouldn't be private ownership of property going through that, the more you think that more elements of society should be decommodified. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, public school in this country, schooling, education, K through 12 schooling in this country is decommodified. It does not cost you anything to go to school. Healthcare, however, is commodified, although it is somewhat decommodified if you're over the age of 65, because you get much of that is paid for by the government through our taxes. And you have varying things in between. Housing, almost entirely commodified in this country. Small amount of public housing, but almost entirely commodified. But largely speaking, when you talk about the left, that's what you're talking about. You can also have like more sort of like cultural aspects, more progressive politics. But when you're talking about real leftism, that's what you're talking about.
Workers' rights, right? Say if workers are worried about getting COVID in their workplace, if they're teachers, you would be supportive of their bargaining side as opposed to power structures, for example.
Right. I mean, it has to do with, sort of like, what rights workers have, who owns the means of production. That's what we talk about. Unless you're just really just someone who doesn't like daddy. You don't like your dad. And that becomes essentially the central thesis of all your politics. I don't like the establishment just because I don't like the establishment. To the point of like, I can't even see who really is the establishment. It's not so much I don't like the establishment. It's like there's a certain type of establishment I don't like. I give you Jimmy Libtardo One's hat, I should say.
Oh my God. What is this?
That hat should be illegal. It really should be.
He looks like a New Jack Swing revival.
Listen to this. Just a reminder, like what Marjorie Taylor Green believes in is about as far right as you can be in terms of like, I guess politics, just broadly speaking, both on a sort of a cultural level and on an economic level. But that doesn't fit Libtardo One's narrative, so we get this.
They say Representative Marjorie Taylor Green is a big conspiracy theorist and a nut job and crazy, and nobody should ever listen to her.
Pause it for 1 second. That's demonstrably true. She's talked about what was the other thing that we played the other day where she was like, what was that we pulled the other day?
The thing about that the Clintons probably murdered JFK Jr. so Hillary could run for that Senate seat in New York.
I mean,
the Rothschilds control a satellite that was causing forest fires.
She got her political start by being a conservative influencer who was saying that the mass shooting in Las Vegas was fake.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I mean, so arguably conspiracy theorist.
Arguably.
Okay. Yeah.
They say Representative Marjorie Taylor Green is a big conspiracy theorist and a nut job and crazy, and nobody should ever listen to her. It's weird, though, that she's out lefting the left all the time.
Moron.
She was out lefting the squad on Ukraine. She's out lefting them on COVID, and she's telling the truth.
Pause it.
About COVID.
How do you out left on COVID? How do you out left on COVID? The only way you out left is you say, like, what rights do people have versus capital? What right do workers have versus capital? And by any measure, Marjorie Taylor Green did not put workers' rights above capital's rights in this question of COVID. He's just talking about she was a COVID denier, and he thinks that's to the left of people who believe that COVID is real.
Because that's what those COVID regulations, masking requirements, vaccine encouragement is actually there to protect, because workers are compelled to be in certain spaces where wealthy people like Jimmy Dore can do his show from his garage, but other workers are exposed to COVID. That's what is actually a leftist position, is trying to protect them.
Matt's emphasized this before on the show, but even so has Jordan Flowers when he came on from the ALU when Christian Smalls was here in studio. Literally the inciting incident for why the ALU formed in 2020 was because there was a severe lack of COVID precautions taken in the warehouses. But, you know, I imagine Marjorie Taylor Green is to the left of Christian Smalls.
I mean, Jimmy Dore is a guy who used his platform to scold the Chicago Teachers Union in the middle of a labor dispute over whether it was safe for them to continue going back to work with a bunch of teachers that were sick, or maybe they should have a pause or something like that. And Jimmy was all saying, "You guys are fear-mongered by Fauci." That's literally a quote.
Yeah.
And to be clear, when you structure it, like when you start this by sort of undercutting the obvious fact that Marjorie Taylor Green is in fact a conspiracy theorist, unless you happen to think that Hillary Clinton assassinated JFK Jr. so that she could run for office, unless you agreed that the Rothschilds have a weather controlling machine or a laser beam or whatever the F it is, then you consider her a conspiracy theorist. So he is running cover for her not being a conspiracy theorist. He is now claiming that she is more of a leftist. Really, I mean, that she would claim that of anybody is absurd. But more of a leftist of the, regardless of what you think about them in the House, the leftist wing of the Democratic Party. That may not be left enough for a lot of people. A lot of us would like them to be, you know, more progressive, certainly have more power. But by any definition, if you care about the word leftism or left, you wouldn't say this unless you're trying to obscure it.
Or unless you're trying to audition for the Daily Wire when you saw that contract.
Well,
something like that.
Unless you're trying to obscure that word left so that people who watch his videos don't know what that word means anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
That you don't really have any concern for that ideology. Because that's the only way you would try and conflate Marjorie Taylor Green with leftism. Is if you wanted to undercut the whole idea of being a leftist.
Yeah,
never mind who is more left or right. You want to conflate what that word even means. Go ahead.
Though that she's out lefting the left all the time. She was out lefting the squad on Ukraine. She's out lefting them on COVID, and she's telling the truth about COVID. So she says, remember when they told you not to take ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine to help you with COVID? I remember that. I remember when they told us that.
Oh, you know what? You don't have to go very far because they're telling you that today, too.
It's still the same advice, you idiot. You have to squint just to get on it's weird that he even mentions hydroxychloroquine because that's been out for a long time.
Nobody's even tried
Ivermectin, it's like if you squint at these few meta-analyses, maybe there's something there, but it's still way, way less than, say, the vaccine.
So she says, remember when they told you not to take ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine to help you with COVID? I remember that. I remember when they told us that. They threatened to take away doctors' and pharmacists' license if they prescribed it. I remember that. My doctor told me that, and it was very hard for people to get prescriptions of ivermectin.
Pause it. You know what? And that was also a problem because some people actually had parasites in their body and needed the ivermectin for real reasons.
Right.
Take away doctors' and pharmacists' license if they prescribed it. I remember that. My doctor told me that, and it was very hard for people to get prescriptions of ivermectin. They controlled and limited distribution of monoclonal antibodies. Remember that? I remember that. So if you lived in a red state, you could get monoclonal antibodies. But if you lived in a blue state, very hard to get them. They were politicizing medicine at the behest of Big Pharma.
Wait a second.
That's
why would Big Pharma only sell it to red state? Places where they don't believe in COVID. It's just none of this makes any sense.
Also,
Outlifting.
the change about monoclonal antibodies happened because the virus evolved and they no longer were as effective.
Exactly.
And people like Jimmy Dore had been spending the entire time saying, we don't need a vaccine, we got these antibodies. And then it shifted, so they needed a new lie to cover up that bad advice they had been given that entire time.
And I have still yet to hear an argument from people like Dore as to why hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin are not under the big pharma umbrella, but the vaccine that was paid for by the government is.
And let's just address the one way they do try to say it's actually a very inexpensive drug. It's only, well, not if you take it prophylactically and have to take it basically a month. You're taking it's like $25 a month you're spending on to big pharma. I mean,
as opposed to the free
moron.
vaccine that you can get for free because of
Exactly.
the government.
Monoclonal antibodies. But if you lived in a blue state, very hard to get them. They're politicizing medicine at the behest of big pharma. That's for
Even
big
Dr.
pharma.
Fauci, he was concerned about, he goes, I don't know why there's not more monoclonals around.
That's
So I'm
right.
concerned. Remember that?
Remember that even Fauci said, I don't know why there's
Hazy
not more
recollections.
monoclonals. He knows exactly why there weren't more monoclonals.
Wait, pause it too.
why?
The reason that he was saying that was because they were concerned about the lower vaccination rate, saying, and Trump at the time was saying monoclonal antibodies will be the way that this is all cured, right? The problem was that they had a finite amount. They were encouraging people to get vaccinated so they wouldn't have to use those monoclonal antibodies, which in the end became antiquated because the virus mutated and the antibodies that were being used for that purpose were not effective anymore. Fauci's a big conspiracy theorist until they want to use his quote out of context to make their point.
And is it possible they just got it confused with blue state, red state? Because in January, they were arguing of last year, the Republicans were arguing that Biden is not giving monoclonal antibodies to red states.
Yeah, I think he was on the wrong track on his brain.
He doesn't even know what he's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, he may remember. It's just that it's also, things are a little bit cloudy. Yeah. All right, continue.
He goes, I don't know why there's not more monoclonals around.
That's
So I'm
right.
concerned. Remember that?
Remember that even Fauci said, I don't know why there's not more monoclonals. He knows exactly why there weren't more monoclonals.
Why?
So they owe answers, and I'll be asking. So turns out she's right about that. And when someone's right about something, no matter if you disagree with them on every
This is
other
so
thing,
Yeah.
you should try to prop them up.
You should try and prop them up. What? All right, first off, he spent the whole thing at the beginning saying that she's not just right about these one limited insane things about COVID, but that she's actually to the left of the most left members of Congress. And no, you can find My Pillow guy will also do this. You can find anybody you want to say that ivermectin and hydrochlorocloxacline will help you with COVID. You can find any. It doesn't matter. You can have your comedy friends say the exact same thing. You don't have to elevate and promote Marjorie Taylor Green.
Unless
He's just trying to sell. Yeah, whatever his agenda is in doing it, that's what he's doing.
That's a great hat, Jimmy.
that hat. Oh, baby. Yeah.
Good God.
I just love the idea that hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin are not a part of big pharma. You know, they grow in the wild. They grow on trees. It's a natural remedy. I can't wait to go and pick off the hydroxychloroquine tree